having me here. I'll get my screen turned on so you guys can see it. And I just want to verify that you see my slideshow. Are we good there?
We are good.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys again for having me and for taking time out of your day to listen to what we have to say. What I want to talk about today is the late spring and the summer outlook, kind of our discussion, our thought process on what it is that we're seeing, what we're kind of watching. As alluded to, we are coming out of a third year La Nina, and in history, dating back as long as we go, we've never had a fourth year La Nina. We've never gone into a La Nina for 4 straight years. So that gives us some indication of what may be coming. Okay. So let's get into the slideshow here. I want to go to the next slide and kind of talk to you about some of our verifications, what we've done in the past, what we've said, how it's worked out, so you know that at least what we're talking about might have some validity to it, right? This is a look at the forecast from last year. This was our preliminary outlooks based on what happened. Overall, it was a relatively pretty good forecast here. We had our preliminary thought process of a dry and warm central plains, which, by the way, we're still dealing with that. That's still a thing right now, right? In terms of the dryness, especially if any of you are from the central and southern plains, you will know, or if you've been following, it's been very, very dry there. That's been the idea for quite a while. The temperature forecast overall was for a fairly warm growing season, and it was. It was fairly warm. We had a cooler risk across the Great Lakes and the portions of the interior Northeast, and you can see to the map here on the top left where there's some whites and some faint greens. There were some cooler times as well. Listen, to start the year, there's been a big divide. It's been really warm in the east. It's been really cool in the west, and that has allowed for some pretty wild weather. We've had an incredibly active start to severe weather season. The northern plains have seen multiple rounds of snow and below normal temperatures. It's been a very active start to the season, but a warm one in the east and a cool one in the west. And again, that's kind of driving everything we've been seeing. In terms of the Midwest, all right, the last 60 days, if you look at this from a 60-day aggregate, we have been above normal in precipitation for parts of the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, and the Northern Plains. Somewhere around that 100 to 125% of the normal mark. But if you look the month to date, just here over the last 24 days, it's actually been a little bit drier. We've actually seen kind of a shift in the precipitation patterns where a lot of the primary growing regions of the Midwest here have been very, very dry. Obviously, places like Nebraska and Kansas have not seen a drop of rain in some spots of the area there. So, been an interesting evolution here into the precip pattern. I think what we're seeing in the central U.S. may change. The drier trend in the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, might continue. We'll talk about that in just a second. This is a look at the annual tornado trend and where we've been here in terms of, versus these normals, right? The severe weather reports, the amount of tornadoes here. You can see we actually are trending in one of the most active tornado seasons to start spring in the last 20 years, if not in the last several years, even beyond that. Just a really, really wild start here to the severe weather season in terms of tornadoes and severe weather reports. This is something we talked about for quite a while. The last 5 years, March, April, May, in terms of storm reports versus analogs, we had targeted up here that we would probably be well north of that 9,000 report mark. Analogs saw that, and it's just been a lot more active than normal, and that's kind of normal coming out of these La Ninas. When we're coming out of these, going into those neutral Enzo phases, or possibly an El Nino, like we might be, we see these elevated severe weather seasons, right? In terms of more than usual. Okay, so let's talk about in the short term where we're going to go over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll look into May and the growing season forecast. And mind you, these are the types of analysis and reports that we do send out on a daily basis. All right, we provide an analysis like this every day to our customers. This is week one on the left. All right, next 7 days shows the fronts come through. These are temperatures from normal, so we're running area wide 5 to 9 degrees below normal, which is it's pretty chilly for this time of year. In fact, Indianapolis just had I believe it was the fifth latest freeze on record. So, record territory for the late season frost and freeze risks, which we have also been talking about for the last several months to our customers. Into week two, those below normal temperatures continue. Week one precipitation on the left. How much rain are we looking at the next 7 days? Well, it's active across the Tennessee and southern Ohio valleys into the northeast. Okay, plenty of rainfall, but into the primary U.S. growing regions, we're not looking at a whole lot of rain across Nebraska, Iowa, northern Missouri, and Illinois and Indiana. However, look down there in central and southwest Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Some beneficial rains may be possible, but I do caution, I do warn you across central northern Kansas, whenever you have the gradient from no precip to a lot of precip in a small area, normally means that forecast is probably going to end up a little bit drier. So we'll go with caution there. Week two, well below the normal precip across much of the U.S. here as that colder air settles in, like we talked about. Okay. So beyond week two, what are we seeing for May signals? What are we seeing for May precipitation, May temperatures? Well, I mentioned the potential of going into an El Nino coming out of this La Nina. In fact, indications now are stronger more than they have ever been here recently for that to happen. Some computer model data is indicating a moderate to even a strong El Nino is possible here as we get into mid to late summer. One global pattern indicator that helps us with the fluctuation between La Nina and El Nino are the global winds and the speed at which the global winds, the wind across the entire planet is moving. Whenever we look at an enhanced global wind pattern or a positive one, the global winds are faster. Okay, so we're heading into this signal of very strong positive AAM or global winds. That's also an indication that of an El Nino-like atmosphere approaching for a time. Well, when we look at strong positive AAMs, we don't have a lot of those, and as strong as we're forecast to get, we're going to put ourselves into rare territory, which helps us with a forecast for May. And the forecast looks to continue to indicate cooler than normal temperatures. Possibly a wetter forecast for the central and southern plains, and a drier outlook for the northern plains, Great Lakes, and interior Northeast. Okay, those are some of the indications when looking at the strong positive AAMs. All right, if this continues, this cooler and wetter risk will certainly run extend its stay into summer. These positive AAMs are indications or correlations to a cooler and wetter growing season for most of us. Okay. What's the computer model data say? Well, this is the European Weekly. This runs twice a week on Monday and Thursday evenings, and this gives us an indication of weather the next 46 days. Sometimes it does a great job. Sometimes it does a really horrible job. It just depends on how its handle is on the pattern, right? How is it doing, if you will, in terms of how it's handling that forecast. A cooler forecast is what it has for the month of May right now. Again, based on what I just said, no reason to disagree with that, right? And a drier forecast over the kind of the Ohio Valley, the northern tier, wetter central plains, deep south. Again, generally, I do not disagree. And you'll see in our outlook in just a moment what I mean by generally. All right. Here's the official overall May forecast right now. On the left is temperatures. We're forecasting a cooler than average May. Above normal temps in the south central plains along the eastern seaboard here as well. The below normal precip, again, when you look at seasonal outlooks, you don't want to take these verbatim, okay? And what I mean by that is you don't want to just assume this is exactly what's going to happen. That's not what we want to do. We want to give generalized ideas on how that pattern may evolve. Generally, we anticipate the south and southeast to be quite a bit wetter than average, and maybe even a couple of severe weather or tornado outbreaks towards that second week of May in the south, right? Generally, across the north, Great Lakes, interior northeast, it's probably going to be drier than normal. As I showed you at the beginning of the presentation, it's actually gotten a little bit drier in the Ohio Valley over the last 30 days. Again, something to consider because we don't have a lot of rainfall in the forecast relative to normal over the course of the next 2 weeks. And you have to remember, as you get into late April, May, you're averaging 4 to 5 inches of rain over the month. So it's not hard to be beneath that average or below it, if you will. Okay. So let's talk about the current drought conditions because it weighs into the forecast here as we go forward into the season. We want to look at areas that are struggling and areas that need our attention. And we know for sure that the right was last year and the left is this year. We note that the drought was much more expansive and intense. An indication that El Nino is starting to fire up is that the subtropical jet stream is wiping out the drought in the western and southwestern U.S., especially across California. We can see that. A lot of times when El Ninos start to come on, the droughts in that area, they're wiped out, and we're seeing that happening. Where we're lagging is the Central Plains and the deep southeast here across Florida. Again, indications are that we may start to work against this. We may start to chisel away at this drought in the South Central Plains if the May forecast holds any type of weight, okay? We need to look at the seasonal signals to see can we get out of this? As we look into the growing season, can we get out of this drought and into more favorable conditions? So let's look at a few notes for the season, right? We have been in a La Nina since mid-2020. But we are noting, look at the bottom right. This was March of 2021. The top right is March of 2023. Here's the difference. La Nina, it's where the Pacific waters are colder across the equator. El Nino is where the Pacific waters are warmer, okay? Colder waters lead to weaker jet streams, moisture supplies are lower, hence the drought situation. Listen, that hints this last year, all right, the far right. There's no jet stream, there's no subtropical flow of moisture coming in because that water was cold. It didn't have, moisture is a byproduct of heat, right? So as we see that warm, that jet fires back up, eliminates that drought, and we see the return of that subtropical jet stream. We have been in that La Nina since mid-2020. The last time we were in a 3-year La Nina was 1998, 99, and 2000. Okay. There has been, however, like I said, major warming going on, and in the eastern portion of that near the coast of South America, you can certainly see that happening. You can see the warming going on right there near the coast there. Okay. La Nina overall, it's done. It's over. We're not going to go into a 4th-year La Nina. Indications are currently that we probably will go into an El Nino, possibly a strong one. Well, that's yet to be seen. Are we in an El Nino for the growing season? I believe that we will be, probably by as early as July. We'll just have to see how quickly that can occur. Listen, El Nino means cooler and wetter, possibly, right? La Nina means warmer and drier. If you just looked at it from a 20-foot view in a nutshell, that's what that typically correlates to in the summer growing seasons. Okay. What you're seeing here, this animation of these fancy colors, this is the equatorial Pacific Ocean temperature of the water from normal. It's the anomaly. You can see the blues rapidly fade away into the oranges and the reds. That's a warmer than normal surface and subsurface. So the water beneath the surface of the ocean, way down 200, 300, 400 meters down into the ocean, is very, very warm. Indicates that again, another sign of El Nino coming based on observations, not even based on a forecast. This has actually already happened. Okay. All right. So again, we mentioned there's never been a 4th-year Niña in the history of at least monitoring closely kept record or weather data last 150-ish years or so. Okay. The planet, by the way, is almost 5 billion years old. So if there's a fourth year La Nina, we wouldn't have known about it. But all models are suggesting an El Nino by summer. Many are increasing the intensity to a moderate to even strong state. You can see here to the right, these are computer models from all across the world. Australia, Canada, Europe, Japan, France, United States, United Kingdom, you name it, they're all going into a strong El Nino. Okay. El Nino summers, just to give you an idea of what some of those summers might look like, 97, 02, 04, 09, 2015. Those are some years where we had a pretty prevalent El Nino during the summer. Okay. Another spot or another indicator or measurement, if you will, for our growing season, other than what we just talked about, El Nino or La Nina, is our aridity index. Okay. And I want to talk to you real quick about what the aridity index means. It's the difference between the standard deviation of the high temperature minus the standard deviation of the precipitation departure. So the higher the number, the more arid or drier the conditions can become, or more prone to heat. Okay. And that can lead into summer. So these high numbers here, where you see the browns, the 2.6, the 2.7, those are indications of what the summer may do. Now, the two maps you see, these are previous years. 01 or 21 on the right, 22 in the middle. These maps are indications of our theory proving to be correct. We've noticed the last several years there's a correlation between the winter spring aridity index and the rainfall in the planting and growing seasons, as well as increased heat waves. We've been able to note a pretty decent correlation here. So in 21, you can see that we had indications it would be drier across the central and northern US. It was. In 22, we had the same indications across central and southern US from the aridity index. The outcome was drier. Okay. What's it saying for this year? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here's the current aridity index this winter. Okay. It does not have the hot and dry signals that we've seen. Okay. The last 2 years. It does have a wetter and a cooler signal in the northern and the western US. We feel it is important to factor this into the forecast. In terms of summer, the only areas with the drier and warmer signals at this point in time would possibly be the far southwest or the eastern Ohio Valley and the mid-Atlantic. If there's going to be an area this summer where it's drier or warmer, it's going to be where these numbers are in the light browns or the darker browns, based on this tool, based on this indication. Could there be some periods of some drier weather in the Eastern Corn Belt? Yes, there could be. Overall, when the season ends and we go, hey, what did 2023 growing season look like? It's probably going to be more like average. Probably it was an average growing season for rainfall, okay, and temperatures. And we'll touch more on that here in just a second. Okay. So the summer signals. Okay, on the right is what we've seen the last couple of seasons. We've seen this very dry central plains, western half of the Corn Belt, and it's been very warm. That's the neutral / La Nina look, if you will. Okay. As we progress into this warm neutral to El Nino state, and the reason we talk so much about El Nino and La Nina, by the way, it's the strongest teleconnection / pattern driver in the world. What these Pacific Ocean temperatures are doing drives the weather patterns everywhere, all over the world. Okay. So the indications are right now for a cooler and wetter summer. The far left is our analog package for the summer forecast. It's a cooler one. It's a wetter one. With that said, I think there can be periods of warmer and drier weather mixed in with cooler and wetter weather. But it's a summer when we look back on it, we might say, well, it was a cool summer. We had some rain. Okay. It's not going to be, I don't think, like the summers we've seen in the last 4 to 5 years, or it's not a 2012 or an 88 or anything like that. it's a summer that's probably pretty conducive for a good crop, is the idea right now. It's probably going to be a pretty decent crop based on weather forecasts as of April 25th. What's the risk? Here's the risk. The Pacific Ocean, the northern Pacific Ocean, this big warm blob that you see up here near the chain of the Aleutian Islands, the Bering Sea of Alaska, has the potential to lean to a drier and warmer risk for a time. I want to preface this. Because of the onset of El Nino, what I believe may happen is this would pertain to the first month of the summer outlook. June is what that would be. June, July, August is summer, correct? The risk would be greatest early summer when El Nino forcing is not yet prevalent. It's not settled in. It's not strong. So we believe that June, as of right now, holds the biggest hotter/drier risk for the central U.S. in the maps that you see here. Temperatures left, precip right. Okay. Data and analogs would generally support the idea that June is the warmest month this summer relative to normal versus normal, if you will. That's the idea here. If El Nino really starts to take a stronghold, the AAM stays positive, this is probably a pretty mute point mute risk at that point. The cooler signal can prevail if that continues. That big positive AAM is a big indicator to a cooler and wetter summer. It is right now. I've been told we're one of the few or the only weather outlook vendor that's as cool as we are for our summer outlook. We just discussed it before the meeting. We said, hey, a lot of the other vendors are not nearly as cool as we are. Well, we still feel pretty good about this based on what we know. We don't see a reason to change that. So our preliminary outlook for summer, right here, you see it. This is our official. The rubber meets the road. It's cool for primary growing regions. Warm in Texas. That's a big deal for the energy demand, cooling demand. Again, I think there can be periods of warmer and drier weather, as there is every summer. That's a normal thing in summer. But when we look at it at the end of the season, we might go, this was a cooler summer and then we had adequate rains. Can there be some spots where the precip is above normal and it's wetter than normal? Yes, there can be. And that's certainly possible across right through the central U.S. there, where temperatures too can be cooler overall. Okay. But again, when you look at the corn yields, when you look at the weather and what it typically gives us in that crop, we are actually suggesting an above trend line yield based on weather analogs. Before you get crazy, this has nothing to do with you, with what you plant or how you plant or the hybrid you use or the whatever. This is weather only. So if you look at weather, which basically drives the yield for the most part, we're suggesting an at or above trend line yield for the corn. Out of the last 6 summers we've done this, by the way, we have never missed this. I will say, if we say a below trend or above trend or trend line yield based off of our weather forecast, we have actually not missed it yet. We're pretty good at this. Knock on wood. But we are suggesting a healthy corn crop this year overall. Might some places struggle? Sure. Soybean, we're suggesting right at trend line, which is good, which is a good soybean crop, okay, overall. So do what you might with that, right? Use that as you can. Last slide. This is for summer cooling demand. Overall, the trend, how much are we running the air conditioning, right? It's been up and up and up over the last, 30 years, 40, 50 years even. We are, however, forecasting a trend line or possibly a little bit lower than the 10-year normal for a cooling demand standpoint for the population-weighted cooling degree days, for those of you that might be interested in that. Okay. If you are interested in any of the information I've presented, getting it on a daily basis or anything that we might be able to help you with, scan the code there. That's a way to contact me pretty quickly if you've got questions, you can email me or scan the code. I'm happy to do that. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have with the outlook, if there are any.
Well, Michael, I think you've got some people pretty happy, suggesting almost a two bushel an acre increase, right? So they're going to hold
Yeah.
you to that. They always do, right?
Right. Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Couple questions that we had come in as people were registering and coming through. One of them, I'd like to hear about what farmers should generally expect for rainfall during spring and summer months going forward. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what I just presented. I mean, I think the takeaway here is that, um, you know, from a standpoint of the Eastern Corn Belt, the Ohio Valley, I think we're looking at the best takeaway right now is a normal season for summer, periods of wet, periods of dry. Further west you go, I think it can be a little bit wetter. That slither you see through the central portion of the country, from the Northeast to Indianapolis to Des Moines, when we say equal chances, what that means is right now we just don't have enough evidence to lean wetter or drier. So we put an equal chance in there. Historically, El Niños present adequate rains. That's my best takeaway for that question.
Another one, and I assume it's just because of the pattern we're coming out of and going into, but why are we experiencing so much more wind in central Kentucky right now, maybe in comparison to years in the past?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it is because we're dramatically changing up global weather patterns all across the world right now. We're coming out of this La Nina, we're going into this El Nino, and it's an abrupt change. And as I mentioned, the global winds actually are forecast to be stronger, uh, possibly some of the strongest they've been in many recent years for May. Um, and that is a direct correlation to coming out of one and going into another. I would suspect and anticipate that to continue for a little bit.
I know that you spent some time covering this, but it was a question that came in, so I definitely want to address it. But one of the growers on the call is concerned about temps during corn pollination, late June and early July. Is that something that should be on the radar of the growers?
I don't personally right now. I don't think so. I mean, if anything, that period has a greater risk to be cooler than it does hotter at this point. Um, that is based purely on as much as I can foresee as of April 25th. Um, Indications are currently I would not be concerned about that.
Good deal.
Yeah.
That is all the questions that I had come in on my side. If you have anything else on yours, do you?
No, I'm good. I appreciate everyone, listening to me, and I appreciate you having me. And if there's anything I can do for you guys, like I said, please feel free to let me know.
One of the things that Michael and I talked about as we were preparing was just how kind of there's a little bit of uncertainty in the weather right now, and as we switch from pattern to pattern, that creates additional weather risk. And so one of the things that I'd like to highlight is that as you think about the presentation today, and as you think about what your risk management plan is, we hope that you'll lean on Farm Credit to be that trusted expert when it comes to crop insurance, and any questions that you may have as related to how well are you covered for these wetter conditions or cooler conditions that we may be experiencing as we head forward. But with that, I just want to say thank you. We appreciate Michael for everything that you did in today's presentation. And with that, we will end up today and follow up with everybody via email. So thank you all.
Thanks, guys.